Hi, Ellen. My name is Rose Hurwitz, and I am with the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. Today is July 21st, 2022. And today we are speaking with Ellen Ungerman. Hi, Ellen. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. I appreciate the time that you're taking to speak with me today. And for today's focus for the oral history, I would love to talk about natural disasters in the Dallas area and how it has impacted the Jewish community. Are there any stories that come to mind that you would like to discuss today?
Well, I think the biggest natural disaster would have been the tornado back in 2019 that hit Dallas, but specifically hit 75230 zip code, Preston Royal area, which is always been a hub of the Dallas Jewish community for a long time, and not always, but really for about 50, 60, 70 years. And that tornado touched down in that zip code, and I live in that area.
Have you ever been directly impacted by a tornado?
There was actually a tornado before that that also hit Preston Royal. The tornado must like that area probably 40 to 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that tornado because my brothers went to a school called St. Mark's, and it damaged St. Mark's where they went to school. And it also damaged the Preston Royal shopping area that we would go to for groceries, or we go to for cleaners, or just any errand stuff in that center was heavily destroyed as well. And I remember that from growing up. And that would be an area that the Dallas Jewish community would absolutely be using every day.
So
go ahead. And then subsequent to that was the most recent tornado, which also, for whatever reason, wiped the Preston Royal area. And that tornado heavily damaged Preston Royal, going down Royal Lane towards the J and Federation before it hop, skipped, and jumped to other parts of Dallas. And that was even way more damage than the tornado years ago in the 70s. Heavy damage to a lot of people's homes, to Preston Royal, to the J, Federation buildings, businesses, all around. I did not have any damage to my home.
Good.
And my husband's office is downtown, and there was no damage there. I'm an attorney and a mediator, and I work out of my home. And so that didn't affect my business, but it affected my neighbors, and it affected the J, which I was on the board and an officer at the time, and it affected a lot of the businesses that I use.
Oh, wow. So approximately how long would you say the recovery process took for either the tornado in the 70s or in 2019?
The 70s, I really can't remember because I was a little girl, but yeah. I remember the strip center being down for a while, so probably 8 months, a year.
Wow.
The most recent one was a much bigger tornado, and that tornado damaged Preston Royal, for that shopping area, for a year to 2 years. Damaged the J and Federation for a long time. People were out of their homes for years. They are still starting to rebuild on Royal Lane. There are a lot of empty lots there still when people have not rebuilt their homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it affected a lot of my neighbors, a lot of people I know, organizations I'm involved with. It was just monumental damage.
So have you found that a lot of folks that needed to rebuild their homes have either temporarily or permanently relocated because of the damage?
No, I don't. I think everybody wanted to stay in the area. I don't think anybody moved away. I think you had to find temporary housing somewhere, but people returned to the area. And what the Jewish community did was make sure that people had knowledge and information about resources for their families. Now, of course, they have no control over your insurance agency and whether insurance is going to cover your damage, but if they were available to help you with whatever it is that you needed because you have nothing in your home anymore.
Okay. Would you say that the Jewish community involvement was strengthened after the tornadoes, or was it a pretty well maintained effort?
Honestly, I don't think it made a difference. I think it was always very well maintained. People who needed the help got the help, and the Jewish community always make sure that if you need something, here's how you can reach out and get help. So I don't think it changed anything. The tornado caught people off guard, well, by nature of what it is.
Right.
But it really caught people off guard, including me, because there was a Dallas Cowboy football game at home and it was on TV. And most people had the game on. I'm a lawyer, my husband's a lawyer. We still don't understand why NBC did not lose their license for this. They did not tell anybody there was a tornado in the area or there was a warning or anything until it was literally at Love Field in the heart of Dallas. I mean, this is millions of people live, heavy population density. They didn't interrupt the game, nothing. The only reason my husband and I knew about anything is we were at a friend's house that lives down the street. We left because there was a threat of hail and my husband had a new car and he didn't want to get his car damaged. We drove home. We had no idea that I was driving home and I had no idea there was a tornado in the area. Like I'm on the road, and my husband and I came in. My daughter, who was a senior in high school, was home alone. I mean, I would have, I never wanted her to be home alone. And they interrupted the game after halftime to say, suddenly there's a tornado that's touching down 5 minutes from where all of us live. So you had no time to prepare. No time to do anything.
Wow.
Nothing, no knowledge, no notice, nothing. And so we ran into our laundry room because there's no windows. I did not hear a tornado siren until I was in my laundry room. And on my phone, I have the TV on my phone, and it was tracking the tollway towards my house. And that's when I heard the siren. I mean, it was 2 minutes from my house. So I'm sure there were people out on the roads.
Yeah.
So the city of Dallas did not do a good job. The media did a horrible job. There's been a lot of articles written about that. And luckily for us, it did not come down my street. It went towards the J.
Okay. And about how many blocks away is that, did you say?
20.
Goodness gracious. Did you and your family have a preparation plan for any potential natural disasters before?
Yes.
Then?
Well, in Dallas, there's no earthquakes and there's no hurricanes. So the natural disaster is a tornado. There's tornado warnings all the time here, all the time. So a lot of times you sort of disregard it. You also look at where the tornado is because it's such a large area, North Texas, that the tornado, it's always in Palo Pinto County. I don't know why. Palo Pinto County is about an hour and a half from me. Very rural. And so you hear that, and I feel bad for the people that live there. It's really farmland and ranchland, but it wouldn't affect me. And so I pay attention to a tornado warning, but I don't ever think it's going to be in my neighborhood. Let's just say that. But we know that if it is, we do have a plan that you go in the laundry room because there's no windows and it's totally interior.
Good. That's a good plan.
Yeah. And we did, and we hung out, and then I lost power.
Do you know how long you lost power for?
I lost power for 3 days because I'm so close. I lost power. My grid was gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have plenty of food or water access to any like resources?
I always have water bottles. And so we had water. Obviously, I didn't want to open my refrigerator or freezer because then the food would be spoiled. And then I had food and stuff in the pantry. So you just sort of did that. But I had no power. There are people who never lost power. I just am so close that the grid was gone.
Were you impacted at all by the freeze in February 2021?
Actually, more.
Really?
So yes, so the tornado for me was the power loss. And then I knew people who had heavy damage to their homes, but most of them had, well, everybody had a family member, friend to move in with, because you're waiting on the insurance company now. And I could see, poles down, lights down, traffic lights in the middle of the street, stuff like that after the tornado. And it got cleaned up. Obviously, these businesses were heavily impacted for a long time and had to rebuild as well. But the freeze was worse because it lasted longer. And the damage to my home, I know it sounds petty, but all of my landscaping was gone. I had a pipe that I was worried we were constantly worried our pipes were going to burst, which would flood my home. I have neighbors, multiple neighbors who, there was a law that got enacted several years ago. It's a zoning in Dallas, that if you have a second story, you have to have sprinklers. So the sprinklers are actually would be above me. I'm in a 2-story house. My house is before that. Everybody who had that, their pipes burst in their house. My neighbor across the street, her house flooded. Her roof fell down in the house. Her second floor fell into the first. So a lot of people have this happen because of this ridiculous zoning law. I have multiple neighbors who literally their second story fell into the first story.
Oh my goodness.
So they had to obviously get out of the house. I had no power for almost a week.
Did you stay at home?
I had nowhere to go. So we stayed in our house. And my temperature, I took a picture in my house, was 34 degrees.
Wow.
My kids are older and they were in college and grad school. So it was just my husband and I have a fireplace in our master bedroom, and I lived in my master bedroom. So much longer. And for me, I did not have tornado damage. I had landscaping damage. It also ruined my pool. And I know it sounds kind of whatever, but it costs you money, or it costs you a large deductible and an insurance claim, because it ruined all my pool equipment. Most people lost all their landscaping. If you had a pool, it was damaged. If you had that second story zoning, you had horrible damage inside your house from flooding.
Goodness, that sounds so difficult.
Yeah, so that was much worse for people than the tornado, and it's something people just don't really even know about. But yeah, the grid failed.
Were there any efforts by the Jewish community in the freeze to help?
Yes, there were. There were, for people who, again, people who had no power or whose homes had damage. It's all burst pipes, who had burst pipe damage. That, first of all, that there's a Dallas Hebrew Free Loan, gives you interest-free loans. JFS has a food pantry. There are people offering housing if someone needed it because your house is flooded. It's not livable. And a lot of people's roofs had heavy damage to their roof. So they had to have the roof replaced, or part of the house wasn't livable.
Do you know how long that reconstruction took in general?
Less than, because it was really interior damage versus your house is blown away. And more, I hate to say cosmetic, but cosmetic. So
Yeah.
way less than, I mean, the lights at Preston Royal Shopping Center have never been replaced from a 2019 tornado. And yes, I've asked my city council person, Janie Schultz, and the previous one, who was also Jewish, Lee Kleinman, explain to me why you can't get a light pole fixed in 3 years. It is still a temporary light.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, no answer, but I've asked both of them.
So are you pretty involved in efforts for recovery, would you say?
No, not at all. No, no, no. I just happen to know both city council people. So I'm
Yeah.
like, let's deal with this.
Yeah. Those are
No.
good connections to have for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has your experience in both actually all three, the tornado in the 70s that you mentioned, the tornado in 2019, and the freeze in 2021, have your experiences impacted your impression of natural disasters or the preparedness of the community in general, or how communities should be responding?
Absolutely.
Let's
Number
hear.
one, I'm mad at the TV station still, because you should have given people notice in a high density, the seventh largest urban area in this country, that there's a tornado plowing down the tollway. Okay. To give people time to get shelter. I know someone who was watching the Cowboy game and had gone to the kitchen, came back, and their house fell, and she broke both of her arms and hands.
Oh my gosh.
Surgery after surgery. Her fireplace, the TV was by the fireplace, and it fell on her. Fireplace fell on her. The brick on the fireplace fell on her.
Oh,
Not a Jewish woman, but somebody a lot of people know in the Jewish community. He's a doctor. Yes, fell on her. Broke both of her arms and her. So there was no warning. So I'm mad about that. I'm mad about the grid. And that we don't have, there should absolutely have been oversight of all of these power plants that they're offline will get online, and they should have been properly maintained. So the grid needs to be fixed to present the other. And then we have now always have plenty of waters. We always have snack and granola bars, things that I can have in my pantry, that if I don't have power, I always have flashlights with batteries. We have all of that. And then I also bought a big battery pack that I can power multiple devices like phones, things like that. And I bought that after the grid.
How would you say the emergency response was after any of
that? I thought the emergency response was great from the city of Dallas. It's just the preparedness from local media and from the city of Dallas. Those tornado sirens should have been going off a long time before that. And then on the other isn't the city of Dallas, it's the state of Texas. The grid failed.
And how have y'all been doing in this heat this summer?
Don't love that, but the grid
don't love it.
Yeah, the grid, it's the hottest. I was here in high school in 1980. That was worse, but the grid has not failed. So I'm really glad about that.
Good. Yeah, we've had plenty of days over 100, too many for me, to be honest.
Yeah. Now I will say this, two other separate things. I went to Houston shortly after the hurricane for reasons I do not know why. My daughter plays field hockey in lacrosse. There was a field hockey, I think it was a field hockey, had to be field hockey, it was in the fall. There was a field hockey tournament, and they told my daughter's team to go, her school. And that St. John's, which is a school in Houston, was still having this tournament. And I mean, I have friends who are from Houston that live in Dallas, and are like, that's impossible. It's really bad there. So we drove. And my daughter.
What year was this?
Oh, this was Harvey.
Okay, so 2017.
Yeah. So my daughter was a sophomore in high school. We drove to Houston. And as soon as we got to the Galleria area, because the tournament was at St. John's, not far from there. I mean, you know where all this is. I looked around, I'm like, are you kidding me? I cannot even believe they're having this tournament. So we saw, because, it didn't affect Dallas at all, but I knew it was bad. And then I got there and I thought, who decided that this should even happen? So we saw it was very bad, still played.
Wow.
Most restaurants were closed. Remember, I'm from Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Our hotel was open because they had a generator with very limited services.
Hmm.
And and we went to, I saw the damage at St. John's and Kincaid because that's where the tournament was. I was like, really? St. John's and Kincaid? Why are y'all having this? And then we went to Kenny and Ziggy's. We always go there in Houston. And you sort of knew it was bad because I knew from friends of mine's parents, but they had, when you walked into, and this is not a Jewish agency, this is a business that has a hard, pretty heavy Jewish population following, talking about aid,
Mm-hmm.
like food.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, wow, this is really bad. But we were there to play field hockey. So it was just crazy. I happened to go. I should never have gone. They should never have had this. But I saw from a business point of view, because it was close to either Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, information about food pantry, whatever JFS Houston is called, meals, things like that. So I knew that the Houston community was having a very big outreach because this business had all kinds of information about food and meals, and if you need this, if you need that, that sort of thing. And then Dallas sent out information to make donations to the Houston Jewish community.
Mm-hmm.
So you could donate however you wanted to, cash, if you had whatever, you could donate to that community.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if there were any efforts for like boots on the ground of
Yes, very much.
people in Dallas going to
Oh,
Houston?
absolutely. People went. Yes, absolutely. People went. People helped. All kinds of. There were people who came up here, and like the synagogues helped them. Jewish schools helped them. Sort of, that sort of thing. Obviously, Jewish Family Service, the J, all helped Houston families who came up here temporarily to live.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them came to live with family, but like, what do you do with your kids? That sort of thing. What do I do with my grandkids? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very much. You could donate, give time, do whatever you want to do. Yeah, very much.
Would you say that the Dallas Jewish community is pretty well connected to others within Texas in times of either natural disaster or even disasters like the pandemic or?
Yes, I would say the Dallas Jewish community is very connected to Houston.
Okay.
Very connected to Houston. I'm going to guess. Well, Dallas includes Dallas Fort Worth. I would guess if something happened in Austin or San Antonio, they would be connected as well, but very connected to Houston, very much so. Yes. And also Israel, if something happened in Israel, constantly things to help Jews in Israel or Ukraine right now. Very much so. Lots of ways that you can get involved or donate.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, you've provided some excellent insight today. Is there any other aspect of your experience that you want to discuss today?
Well, the other thing I would say, since we're talking about natural disasters,
Yeah.
the other thing in the natural disaster world is years ago, this would go back to 2005, is Katrina.
Yes.
I think it's 2005.
Yes.
Okay. So New Orleans has a lot of hurricanes. I went to Tulane undergrad. I lived through one.
Okay.
Not bad. No, my car flooded, but nothing like this.
Good.
So a lot of Jews came to Dallas and Houston from New Orleans. When I say a lot, I mean a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. So they did not return. That's
Did
the
not return to New
one.
Orleans.
They did not return
Okay.
to New Orleans. They did not. They are still here, still in Dallas. They're
Wow.
never returning at this. I mean, they're not. It's been 17 years. They're
Mhm.
not going to return. So the one to me that affected people, a city the most, a community the most would be Katrina. The Jews never came back.
Mhm. Do you know how their integration from New Orleans to
Very,
Dallas happened? Like
very,
finding housing and
well, what happened was people were very involved in Dallas in getting Katrina people here. The synagogues, the Jewish Family Service Federation, heavily involved in getting people housing, aid, school, uh, anything like that, getting them aid.
okay.
Because New Orleans is New Orleans. So they knew no way was this getting fixed fast. I mean, no way was this getting fixed fast. So people who live there know their city. So my kids' school, which is a private school that happens to have a large Jewish population, took in a lot of Jewish kids from Newman. That is a school in New Orleans that is similar to Green Hill, private, large Jewish population goes to school there. So the Newman kids came up here and went to Green Hill, Hockaday, and St. Mark's for the school year, for the year.
Wow.
And a lot of them did not go back.
Okay.
Here at the Israel Temple took in tons of families. But Houston, you went back to Houston. New Orleans, I never went back.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The New Orleans population after Katrina was down by, hold your horses for this one, 20% of the population never came back. 1 in 5 never came back, ever came back.
That's huge.
That's shocking. It's huge. Yeah. It alters now New Orleans is coming back the past few years. I mean, it's been almost 20, but the past few years has seen a rebuild and a resurgence in New Orleans. But I don't know if it's a Jewish rebuild and resurgence.
Okay.
They never came back.
Do you know if the people that came from New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina influenced the decision-making or attitudes regarding natural disasters or recovery efforts or resiliency to the Dallas community at all?
No, no, probably zero.
Okay.
And I know several, I know several people who are from New Orleans who live here. I mean, they live here now. They never moved back. Never. And part of it was, first of all, you know where to go to school. So what are you gonna do with your kids at my age? Your business is gone, or you have no clients for your business. So how do you earn a living? And then where do you live? So there's 3 different modes in the decision for the people who moved here from New Orleans.
Did many of them start businesses in Dallas?
Yes, a lot of them, well, several doctors, lawyers, all professionals. So yes, and people who are active in our Jewish community. They were active there. A woman I know well, and I'll give you her name if you want to contact her, was president of New Orleans Federation. Never came back. Never came back.
Wow.
That's a loss.
Yeah, definitely. What else can I ask you about this? That is so great that the Dallas community was able to assist with that transition, for sure.
The Dallas outreach for Katrina and Harvey was tremendous.
Mhm.
There was no way you could miss it. There was no way you did not know about it. And there was no way, if you wanted to, you could help. Doesn't matter, financial help, taking someone in help, helping load a van or to go down to Harvey to help people, taking people in New Orleans.
Mhm. Would you say that many of the families that came from New Orleans, were they mostly like immediate families or extended families or?
No.
Okay.
People from New Orleans have lived in New Orleans forever. Okay.
Mhm.
It's not a place you move to.
Mhm.
Really, it isn't. And you are from there because your great grandfather was from there. They did not move here. Maybe one or two could have a family member. A lot of them moved here with no family.
Okay.
So they really needed the Dallas Jewish community because there was nobody else to lean on. You may have friends here, don't get, college friends, whatever, that sort of thing, camp friends. But there, that's great, but you really needed the Dallas Jewish community. I mean, they needed schools for their kids. That Levine, I took tons of kids in. I mean, there's no school. You couldn't go to school. What are you gonna do with your kid for a year? And this is before COVID and Zoom where you could do online. There was no online back then.
Right. Do you know how, and I know you said your kids are college age at this point, but do you know
Well, I have a
how?
son who's a lawyer.
Oh, okay. Do you know how
I still have
COVID
one in college,
impacted?
but I have a son who's already graduated law school. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know how COVID impacted the schools and Jewish community in Dallas?
Oh, for sure. First of all, my daughter was still in high school. My daughter was about to graduate. She was a
Okay.
senior. My daughter, this makes me sad. So my son was already in law school.
Okay.
He went to the University of Texas. It went remote. Not a big deal. He did lose the summer internships the kids had stopped because you weren't letting anyone in the office, let alone a bunch of, college and law school age kids. So he ended up having to get another summer clerkship. And classes were remote in the fall as well at the University of Texas for him. So it was a different education environment, and a different work environment and a different job search environment for college and graduate school.
Mhm.
My daughter was still in school. School shut down in March and she never went back to school.
Wow.
She never had a prom.
Oh.
She never had any of her senior activities. She did not have graduation, high school graduation, and she went to school there for 14 years. And then they ended up doing an outdoor graduation in late July, where you could bring two people, your two parents. That was it. Sitting outside with masks on, with nobody, like, not 6 feet, 20 feet apart,
Mhm.
took a picture, and then you went home.
Hmm.
So she had the senior things you always think about,
Mhm.
she had none of it. And then she started school. She goes to University of Texas undergrad with remote classes.
Wow. How was that transition for her from high school to college with remote learning and just
Well, the last couple months at school as a senior, you're not really into it. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not. Okay. So that was okay.
kicks in.
Yeah. That part was okay. Missing everything and not having all the things was not okay. That was very hard.
Mhm.
And things that she'd looked forward to her whole life, she never had. She never had it. Never had it. There was a big senior spring break, never had it. Obviously prom, there's all these senior skip day, senior this, she had none of it. She had nothing. So that part was hard. The University of Texas was online, but Austin was really open. So my daughter came to school. My daughter, they had Rush online. She joined a sorority. Fraternities were having things they probably were not supposed to. Not going to name any names, but we can guess it. Guess two of them. They were having events. The restaurants and bars were open in Austin. I mean, Greg Abbott did not close things.
Okay.
So her transition class-wise was hard because you want to meet people in your major, you want to meet people in your classes. She didn't get to have UT orientation, which is a great way to meet people. So that part was hard.
Mm-hmm.
But she lived in Callaway. A lot of people know it. COVID did not exist in Callaway. So it was the same experience she would have had. Now, she had friends that went to other schools, and it was very hard, very strict. It was not a good college experience. Her only experience, the reason why it wasn't bad is because she went to school in Austin.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So did she move to Austin when the school year started?
Yeah, I mean, she started school. Callaway was open. She moved in early because Rush is before school starts. She moved in for Rush. Now Rush was Zoom, but they still had Rush, and then they still had all the parties.
Okay. Is that a dorm at UT?
Callaway's a dorm. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
It's a private dorm.
Okay.
Heavy Jewish population private dorm.
Okay. Great. Was your son still in Austin at that time?
My son, he didn't go there undergrad, but he was here for grad school. So he was in law school, but it's a different part of campus, and he was in his own apartment.
Okay.
It's different.
How would you say that the pandemic had impacted the Dallas community?
Oh, it hit it hard because, financially, it was very difficult for schools because people wanted a refund on their tuition. They weren't going to pay tuition. So that affects Jewish schools. It also affects the J because it has preschool. It affects synagogues because people don't have the money because they don't have a job, or their business is horrible, to pay synagogue dues, to pay J dues. It affects donations because people don't have extra money to make a donation. So it affects your bottom line financially horribly. And if you're also the J and you're dependent on camp, there's no camp. So it absolutely affects you financially. I mean, it affects the historical society. We don't have events. Can't have an event. Hard to not, you don't have an event.
Right.
So people decide, well, I'm not going to pay for a membership. Money's tight. What we do gets stopped because there's no events. We haven't had a board meeting in person since COVID started, and I'm on the board. I'm on other boards that haven't had a meeting since COVID started. So it affects how you operate.
Have there been any efforts outside of financial support to stay connected within the community? Or
there's stuff all the time. They have everything on Zoom. Every event that you could ever have is on Zoom. So Bookfest is on Zoom. Dallas Historical Society speakers are on Zoom. All the annual meetings are on Zoom. All the board meetings are on Zoom. So all the events are there. You're just not live in person. Now they're starting to come back. This past spring, everything was back. But for 2 years, you just couldn't go to anything because it didn't exist, but you could still interact with people through Zoom.
Yeah. Would you say it was an easy or difficult transition for some folks to go from in-person to Zoom?
Well, I think it was very difficult for most people, especially if you're older and you don't really like the computer.
Was there a resistance?
You can't
join Zoom, or just people had to figure it out?
You had to figure it out. I mean, there's no choice. If you don't do Zoom, you can't be together. First of all, you couldn't be together because law, you couldn't be together. So you have in Dallas, the county judge, a man named Clay Jenkins, who has no medical experience whatsoever. Dallas law and charges him with healthcare. I don't know why. Anyway, so if he limits indoor attendance to family members, you can't get together. Okay. If he limits attendance to under 50, you can't have a large event. So by law, you couldn't do it. There wasn't an option.
How do you think that impacted the Jewish community from a social
Oh,
aspect?
it affected it greatly because there was nothing social going on.
Mhm. Was
You know,
there
it
more of an
affects,
effort to stay connected with individuals, or not as much?
not really. I mean, I think that, if you wanted Zoom, you could. Everything you wanted to do, you could do on Zoom to get together, but you can't get together as a responsible organization. And you also have legally, you can't get together.
Mhm.
So you're not going to break the law on top of it.
Mhm. As neighbors, did you all see each other more or less after the pandemic, or about the same?
You would see people walking
Mhm.
outside or see people outside. And then Texas opened up very quickly. And so now organizations were very careful, even though a restaurant may be open or the mall may be open or whatever, we're very cognizant that we're not going to do things that would ever endanger someone by being in close quarters. And whether a restaurant is open because patio's open, you're outside, or a restaurant's open spaced out, or a store is open with X number of people out inside, it's more of a need versus ours is a choice, and you choose not to put anybody in a position where they could get COVID.
Okay. Would you say in general, not just specific to pandemic, would you say you have a close relationship with a lot of your neighbors, or do you know many of them?
Oh, I know my neighbors.
Okay.
I lived on my street for 25 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know my neighbors.
Good,
I walk my dog every day. So I mean, I'm a walker. I'm out. I walk every day. So I see everybody. We all see each other. Obviously not everyone's a walker, but we all know each other.
Yeah.
I know my neighbors. Yes.
Okay. And would you say that in times, we've talked a lot about different times of disaster or trauma, that you would go to them for any?
I would certainly go. A couple of my neighbors for sure.
Okay. That's great. Is there anything else you want to talk about today, or
I think we're
feeling
good.
good? Awesome. Well, Ellen, thank you so much for your time, and I can come back on here. Amazing. Thank you so much. That was
Sure.
so much great insight. I know we kind of pivoted to like pandemic, but
It's
I
all
would
right.
definitely also consider that a traumatic disaster, even though it's not weather related.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is how all these, yes, you have Dallas centric things, obviously, but you also have the connections through the Jewish community to disasters nearby you. That's Houston. In New Orleans.
Yeah.
You had to leave the state. And so most of them, instead of going to Mississippi in the Jewish community, they came to Dallas and Houston's Jewish community.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the impact of Katrina too. Like
Katrina altered
today's conversation.
Katrina
Yeah,
altered New Orleans in the New Orleans Jewish community. I've been on the alumni board for Tulane University after Katrina for 2 years. This is a really sad statistic. The largest employer in New Orleans was Tulane University. That's like saying the largest employer is Rice. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible statistic.
Yeah, I wrote a paper this spring about the impact of the Black community in New Orleans, and it was just devastating. Like a third did not have any type of house to return to. Like no option. And like you said, it's very much a generation.
Here's what happened. So it was not the hurricane.
Right.
It was the levees. The hurricane was not the problem. The levees didn't hold.
Yeah.
And where the levee broke was in the Ninth Ward. And now I'll be honest with you, I've never been to the Ninth Ward. Okay. And that area, which is the poorest area, the levee broke in the Ninth Ward. The levee broke a couple other places too, don't get me wrong, but the big break was the Ninth Ward. And the housing is so old and poorly maintained. And so the damage, I mean, these aren't lovely, $1 million brick homes that had tornado damage. Okay. These are run down, wood-sided, have seen a lot of hurricane damage already, which means the woods rotted on the bottom and then they just blew away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's absolutely devastating.
Devastating.
Yeah, and similar situation with Houston, that so much, like, of course it was tons of rainfall, but so much of the devastation was led to just poor management of the water system.
Yeah, the grid was the freezes. Dallas freezes all the time. Okay, not all. It wasn't the worst ice storm ever. It not even close. The grid failed. Okay, so the power grid failed. That has nothing to do with that. In New Orleans, it wasn't the hurricane. That's the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers didn't maintain those levees. Okay, the levees failed. And also the state of Louisiana failed because they could have moved people out and they didn't move people out. That's also state. That's all government. That government failed them.
Well, I'm very hopeful that my eventual research and hearing stories like yours and perspective of people will help influence policy and just the way that residential construction is managed, so that way that people can avoid as much harm as possible. So I really, really appreciate you meeting with me today and sharing your story. And it was so lovely meeting you.
Nice to meet you. Good luck with everything.